The following is a message from Christ Central Manchester, a church that meets in the heart of Manchester in the UK. To find out more about us, please visit www.christcentral.org.uk.
This morning, I found myself in the kind of set of series that we've been looking at, one or two different things. The way things worked out, I found that this week was a kind of empty slot in terms of what I was going to preach on. There was no sort of plan for this morning, and I really went with what I felt God lead me on a couple of different themes. And so this morning, I'd love to address a couple of key areas for us as a church. And our title is A Mobile Community, which is not a bunch of teenagers stood in a circle on their mobile phones. That's not what I mean, although that might be the image you've immediately got. It is now. I want you to have more of that kind of image that you see on the screen. I want you to think of the themes of community and flexibility. The themes of friendship and the themes of kind of mobility. And so this morning we're going to look at these two different themes. And I just want to commend us as a church to start with. I want to commend you, especially if you were here at the kind of beginning of this church, when it was a church plant, and it was just a bunch of people in a room praying together and hoping and praying for God to do something amazing in a particular estate in Swinton. I want to commend you guys because I believe there's something in the DNA of this church because of what you guys invested at that time. And it's a DNA of flexibility. It's a DNA that's more concerned with the important things that God is interested in than it is interested in creature comforts and tradition. It's a DNA that says intimacy with God, serving the marginalised, reaching out, being open-doored and open-hearted, being less fussed about bricks and mortar and comforts. That's the DNA that I want to commend, especially those that have been in the church for several years and longer. And it dawned on me I felt God highlight it to me a couple of prayer meetings ago. And it's great that Anne commended us to be there tonight and urged us to be there. A couple of prayer meetings ago, we were stood there in Mocha Parade, and this isn't me making it more attractive. On the contrary, you'll hear what I'm about to say. We're stood in our Mocha Parade offices, which, to be honest with you, have seen better days. And the heating recently has been appalling. Boiler problems galore. And not only that, but we've got these aluminium chairs that if you're not already cold by the time you get into the building, if you sit on one of these chairs, you suddenly are, below zero and you feel cold. It's amazing. They kind of suck the heat out of everything that touches them. So I just want to... we were stood there in this cold building praying with these cold chairs and this building that's seen better days. And it suddenly dawned on me, do you know what? This is what not that we're into run-down buildings, but this is kind of something of what we're about. We're here to pray. And actually, there's something in us that says, I'm not bothered if it's cold. I'm not bothered if the chairs aren't great. I'm not bothered if the building isn't perfect. We're here for other reasons. We're here for other priorities. We want to pray. We want to seek God. We want to ask Him to have mercy upon our cities of Salford and Manchester. We want to ask Him to bless our young people in our church. We want to ask Him to bless us as a church. We want to ask Him to bless the communities around us. And so I want to commend you. I want to praise you this morning as a church and say, it's fantastic and it's in there. And this morning is me really emphasising that to the point where we don't lose it. We don't ever move away from that beginning. There's something foundational here. There's something valuable here that says God and His purposes first. Creature comforts, not so bothered. So I wanted to revisit this. I want to address this, and I want to look at how we do community and friendship. How we do all of that while still being flexible, still being on the move. And so our main points this morning are friendship, number one, and mobility, number two. How do we do friendship, first of all? As Christians in 2016, in our postmodern culture, and with all that's going on, how do we do it? What does the Bible have to say about friendship and about community? How did Jesus approach friendship? How do we navigate our busy worlds of work and home responsibilities and church meetings and other responsibilities that we might have and make time in all of that busyness for friendships that count, friendships that matter? How does social media fit in? Are we becoming so superficially friendly with hundreds that we're unable to sustain proper friendships with 2 or 3. In the book of Proverbs, if you've ever read it, you'll know that wisdom is highly prized. And one of the things that Proverbs says about wisdom is if you want the full package of wisdom, then you need to work at friendship. It's actually in there. We're going to read a number of verses from Proverbs that highlight how important friendship is. If you want to be wise, then we need to be good at forging and keeping friendships. Friends and good friends are more important than we realise. More important in the Bible than we might realise. Some of us might think, well, surely I just need to love Jesus and know Jesus and have a bit of God TV and a few decent books and I'm all right. No, apparently, according to the Bible and according to Proverbs, you need friends. You need friends. Proverbs 17:17 says this: a friend loves at all times, and a sibling or a brother is born for a time of adversity. And probably the sense there is that a good friend, a real friend, will be there all the time. And it's like a sibling hasn't really got a choice but to be there when the chips are down. It's kind of their job. They were born into that. Whereas a friend will choose to just be available at all times. 18:24 of Proverbs, next verse on the screen, says, one who has unreliable friends or merely just companions soon comes to ruin. But there is a friend who sticks closer than a sibling or a brother. A real friend is reliable. A real friend sticks closer than a sibling. Remember, this is written a long time ago into a culture that would have been almost obsessed with family. Family would have been one of the main priorities in that culture. Massive. Way more important than we might realise or understand, especially in UK culture. So it was much bigger than we realise to say that actually friendship is more reliable than family. Real friendship is more reliable than family. Real friendship sticks to you closer than a sibling was a massive thing to say. Our culture doesn't see family like that, so it doesn't have the same meaning. But just imagine for the moment we put friendship above everything else that our culture says is important. So our culture might not say family's that important. Some of you are from different cultures and you know what it is for family to be kind of number one. Well, imagine the Bible saying actually friendship's more important than even your brothers and sisters. Or good friends will be there for you in a way that a brother or sister won't be. Amazing. Our culture may not put family up there, but it will put other things up there. It will put romantic and sexual relationships above friendship. Friendship doesn't grab the headlines, does it? It's not very snazzy. And friendship is voluntary. And we don't kind of depend on friendship in a physical or material way in the way that we might depend on colleagues or employers or family. We have needs that those kind of relationships meet. Friendship's different to all of that. We don't kind of physically need friendship. And friendship takes deliberate effort and takes time. Jesus taught us a lot about friendship. He ultimately, if you want to put it this way, he ultimately was all about restoring our friendship with God. Kind of that's underneath all of it. That was the reason he came to this planet, was to restore our friendship with God and with him. And then he said other things like, I call you friends, not servants. And he showed as a human, he showed his need of friendship. Remember in the Garden of Gethsemane? He needed them. Did you see? I mean, he kind of doesn't need them, but he showed that as a man, he needed his mates with him. And they actually let him down, as we see in the Garden of Gethsemane. And they let him down again at the cross, most of them. But he also showed us, I believe, something of how friendship works. Because you see, even Jesus couldn't have the same level of friendship with hundreds. Jesus had kind of categories of friends. I think he had the 70. Then he had the 12, and not all of the 70 were in the 12, obviously. It doesn't work. Just in case you wondered. And then he had the 3. So there was something about the 3 that was different than the 12. And it looks rude. How could Jesus have been a bit partial to Peter, James and John and ignored the others? We can understand why he ignored Judas, but what about the others? So even Jesus had what looked like his favourites. On the one hand, he came to save us and give us friendship, and he did that for billions over history. So we all have friendship with God and we have that intimacy with him. But as a human being, on a human level, he had 3 friends that were his close friends. One who said he was the one that Jesus loved, John. And then there was something different about the 12, I would argue, and there was something different then about the 70. So if Jesus can cope with 2 or 3 friends, I might suggest that you and I can just about cope with 2 or 3 close friends as well. Some of us will have more capacity than that, more time than that. But the point is, Proverbs says there's, as we'll go on to see, it takes effort, it takes time, it takes care, it takes energy. And you can't have that with dozens. You just can't. So friendship's important. It's a theme of Proverbs that actually without friendship we perish. One of the themes that comes through. So how do we find these friends? How do we kind of dig them up? Where do we get them? We go online? I'm not saying that's wrong to online date at all. How do we go about it? How do we go about finding friendships? 18:24 again. Proverbs 18:24. Let me read it again. One who has unreliable friends or companions soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. So you won't necessarily have lots and lots of these close friends that stick closer than siblings. But then let me read this from Proverbs 27 verse 9 as well, just to pair it up with that other one from chapter 18. 27 verse 9. Perfume and incense brings joy to the heart, and the pleasantness or sweetness of a friend springs from their heartfelt advice. Real friendship is like sweet food. You know when you've got a friend and just hanging out with them, the thought of hanging out with them is pleasant and sweet. It's not like, oh, grief, I've got to hang out with them again. I would argue, that's not 2 or 3 kind of friendship. That's not that kind of friendship. That's probably a companion. And there's something natural and heartfelt and sweet about those closest friends to you. It's not something you can manufacture. You almost kind of discover friendship like this. But you do need to work at it. So it's a kind of, almost sounds contradictory. You discover these kind of friends, but at the same time it does need work. But you won't find this kind of friendship in a formulaic way. You recognise what's already beginning to happen. And you know that, don't you? You've had friends that you've drifted away from, but at one point they were in your kind of, they would have been categorised as your closest friends, but you've moved on and times have changed and maybe they've moved to Australia and it's just got very difficult, even with modern technology, to feel like you're really connected with them. And so things can change. But I would suggest we always need 2 or 3 people that we can be completely ourselves with, completely honest with, and you won't have that with 100. I don't care how many Facebook friends we've got. It's not the same as the old-fashioned version. So how do we... Okay, so maybe it's something you discover and it's more natural than we might want it to be. But how do we then build those friendships from the floor up? How do we invest in those friendships? Well, let's go back to that 18:24 again. We stick. Friends stick. Friends have got stickability. Friends are there. They're constant. They're not constantly nagging. They're not constantly desperately wanting your attention. That's different. But they're there for you. See, companions will say, if you need anything, give me a call. Friends, close friends, will say, I know you need this, and I'm here for you. I can tell you're going through it. There's a difference, isn't there? Friends like this are there for you when things are good and when things are not good. They're not bugging you. Proverbs talks about having that kind of friend that just is annoying. They're not like that. That's not that kind of close friend. but they're there when you need them. How else do we build these friendships? Well, we offer constancy, we offer stickability, we also care. Proverbs 25:20 says, "Whoever sings songs to a heavy heart is like one who takes off garments off somebody on a cold day or pours vinegar on a wound." In other words, a good friend knows if you're going through it, and they don't come into the room singing joyful songs or banging on about how great their lives are when you're going through it. They know you're going through it, and they sit with you. A bit like Job's friends did. If you know the book of Job, they did it right to start with, and then they opened their mouths and it all went wrong. Good friends know when you're going through it. They don't start singing about how amazing their lives are. We care. Good friends care. They don't pour vinegar on an open wound. Then, good friendship has honesty about it. 27 verse 5 and 6 says this of Proverbs: "Better is an open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses." We as friends will tell them what they need to hear, even if it's difficult. See, companions, which you can have lots of, they might just flatter you. But friends will risk rebuke. In fact, it's usually easier to receive tough love from friends, but sometimes it takes time. And it takes one or two of these moments for the friendship to get deeper, so that next time you need to bring some honesty, it's easier. You know the friendship can cope with it. Does that make sense? So on the first couple of occasions, there might be a few rocky days or a few silent days because you've said something to your friend who you love and they've not taken it very well. Or they've thrown it back in your face. And a couple of days later, reconciliation comes. They admit that you were probably right. Next time one of you needs to say something honest to the other one, you know your friendship will survive it. You know you can be honest and risk it a little bit. We often say, unless you've had a decent bust-up with somebody, there's only so much depth to a friendship. It doesn't mean we go looking for bust-ups, but you know what I mean? That's why these things take time. I think growing a good friendship, which has that natural start to it, can take several years, actually. You can't get that through Facebook. And you can't even get that on a Sunday morning. There's too many of us, and there's no time. We have 5 minutes with about 8 people at the end of the meeting, don't we? On average, you might get to talk to 5 or 6 or 7 people, 8 if you're brilliant. But none of it's deep. It's how are you doing? If you get the honest response, that'll be one that you get to talk to that morning, because that then takes up the rest of the morning. You know what I'm saying? Friendship takes time, takes investment. Shallow friendship won't get real. It won't risk the friendship. Hopefully, being companions and community like this, where we can't all be everybody's best friends, we still look out for each other. So companionship isn't supposed to be negative. It's just not as good as close friendship. Does that make sense? So it's not like as companions or as people in the same church together we can gossip about each other because we're not close friends. That's not what I'm saying. But there is a difference, is all I'm trying to get at. So in church, we need these close friends. Maybe you get 1 or 2 over a couple of years. And you need companions as well. And we need to be there for each other. We need each other. But the point I'm really trying to make is we won't have 100 close friends. Now we see in the book of Acts a close-knit family. A really close-knit family. I would say the book of Acts, the beginning couple of chapters of the book of Acts, has been the bar that churches and Christendom has been aiming for ever since. That high bar of everything, everybody shared everything, and everybody met together every day. Some of you are thinking, that sounds awful. Some of you are thinking, that sounds amazing. Every day with my Christian friends. Some of you are thinking, you have got to be kidding me. Hands up. No, I'm going to say hands up. But I would say that this was the moment. They shared everything. They met together daily. But even in that context, I don't think everybody had 50 close friends. Even in that context, they might have had capacity for a few more close friends than you and I can cope with, but not a lot more. Jesus had, I would argue, the example that we are to see, that even Jesus, 2 or 3 friends. But you can say about the early church in Acts, they did church and community and family and companionship and friendship. They did it well. And we've been aiming at it ever since. And in that context, you don't see a super pastor who's looking after everyone. You see a church that's one anothering and doing community. And on a side note, the 6 of us that are elders or pastors here at Christ Central, we don't exist, and you probably know this, but let me say it anyway, we don't exist primarily to meet all your personal friendship needs. I might sound obvious, might not. We're not very good at that. Some of us aren't very friendly. Naming no names. And we're not also here to meet the kind of counselling needs of all of the 150 or so of us that there are. We primarily are here to facilitate and lead all of us, as it says in Ephesians 4, we're here to lead all of us into that work of looking out for each other. So that 90%, I would say, of all the care and all the friendship goes on among us. Of course, that's got to be true. But sometimes we can go, oh no, I need to see the pastor. And then sometimes it will be the case. But primarily we look after each other in our small groups that we call community groups. That's where I would see predominantly most of the care for one another taking place. When situations arise that are too much for that context, then recently we've put together what we're calling a pastoral team that we've had in previous years, but we've put it together again more recently, and Anne-Marie, who's back there, leads that. It's got 1 or 2 of the eldership, 1 or 2 of the eldership are on that team, but Anne-Marie leads that, and we're really happy that we're happy just to be on that team. And the beauty of it is that with all that we've got going on, the real desire behind it is that no one would fall in between people. No one would fall in between and be left stranded. Again, so that us as the eldership team aren't doing all of the counselling, but the pastoring and the counselling goes on among us the majority of the time. And we are here to release you guys into that work. And we've got the pastoral team just in case. And then we've got the eldership team as well, just in case. So, just to explain, and that really is in a heart, or of a heart that would get back to something of what went on in Acts. But it's not about a vicar. It's not about some special holy people. It's about all of us sharing life together and helping each other out with relationships, kids, friendships, marriages, whatever's going on, your finances. So friendship's biblical. It's seen in the life of Jesus. It's seen in the early church. We see it in the book of Proverbs with the emphasis on wisdom. We need each other. We don't just need Twitter or Facebook friends. We need old-fashioned ones. We won't be everyone's close friend. The friendship of someone who is close to you, if they love Jesus, is actually going to be more than enough for most of the things that you go through. You don't need that super pastor. You don't need that special, really wise person. We need to work at friendships. And of course, if we want friendship like that, then if we want friends that are going to be like that to us, then we have a responsibility to be stickable, caring, and honest with the people that we're building these kind of friendships with. Secondly, again, just remember I was commending us at the beginning for this DNA that's in us of flexibility, pioneering kind of DNA that says I'm more keen for God's presence, more keen for His glory, Him doing stuff in our communities, less concerned with comfort and safety. I know the most stable place and the safest place to be is in His presence and doing what He's called me to do, however hard it might seem. Matthew 10, we see Jesus sending out the disciples. I imagine that would have been scary and exhilarating all at the same time. we're going to do this stuff on our own. Where are you going? He sends them out. Don't, go for it. Yeah, there'll be demons, but just go for it. What? Where are you? It was like a precursor to, I'm going to go and be with the Father. I'm going to give you the Holy Spirit. What? In Exodus 12, as the people of Israel are being kicked out, finally by the Egyptians who are saying, no more plagues, please, will you go? We are done. Get out. And here's a load of, I think, gold, right? They give them a load of gold to get on their way. Amazing what God does. The people are leaving, and such is the urgency, such is the calling, such is the vision of this better future, that they make bread without yeast. They kind of have to rush at everything, and therefore there's no yeast around, and they make this unleavened bread. And it can seem like a small thing to us, but it's remembered still to this day in Passover. They eat unleavened bread. They eat bread without yeast for the whole of Passover. It was called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It was that important that they didn't use yeast. You think, well, it's only a small thing. It was massive. It was to remember the turmoil of leaving in haste. It's called the bread of affliction in Deuteronomy. It was to remember that God had delivered them. But also there was a sense of remembering the willingness of their ancestors to go, to forsake comforts and go. And then again in the early church, we've seen this commitment they had to each other. But either having heard the go of Matthew 28 when Jesus sends them out, finally, the Great Commission, or if they weren't there, the echoes of it. The early church, on the back of the Great Commission, they get into these little communities called churches, but they never stop going. They never get comfortable, at least not for a couple of 100 years, and then we've been battling this comfort syndrome ever since. But for the first couple of 100 years, it was all good. There was this willingness. And even when they were scattered through persecution, there was still a willingness to meet anywhere and everywhere. A willingness to face persecution, to gossip the gospel, and to give to the needs of others. They were flexible. They weren't buildings orientated or comfort focused. Mobile, really Christian mobility, means not getting comfortable as well as not being actually static. Not fixated with comfort. Not fixated with, oh, well, we used to do it that way. That's tradition. Or traditionalism. Or fixated, well, what's best for me? What's best for me and my family? What's best for me and my calling in all of this? Not fixated with those things. Truly mobile Christian churches are not primarily about those things. They are after some other key things that keep them truly mobile. What are those other things? Hunger for his presence. Intimacy. Hunger for intimacy. Hunger for open doors. Desperate for salvation stories. Desperate that no one in our communities would go without, either in the church or out there in the communities. Desperate that broken lives are repaired and made whole. Living with a holy discontent with the way things are. Daily longing after the presence of the Spirit. And if all that's in place, who has time for these chairs aren't very comfortable? You don't have time for it. We're just about these things. Or I preferred our old venue with its freezing cold chairs and whatever. I preferred it the way it was. Or I wish this was different. I'm not sure I can stay in this church until they sort the heating out. I mean, it sounds crazy, but you hear crazy stuff. That's just our eldership team. I'm joking. I think I'm joking. We are a church that's on the move. We have been, and I want us to continue to be. Doesn't mean we have to keep finding a different place to meet every Sunday. That's more interested in that first list than the sort of second grumbly list. And my challenge for us this morning is to stay like it. Those of you that have joined in recent years, you need to know this place, this church is mobile. It's like that van, big, good to go. It's the kind of van I'd love to stay in at Devoted. Rather than a tent. I'd love that. Can you imagine rocking up at Devoted with that? Everybody would be like, and really envious, wouldn't they? And it's obviously it's American, but I'd get it imported just to take it to Devoted. But that's the kind of feel of it. My challenge this morning is if you're part of this church, if you've only joined in recent years, this is what's going on here. This is what we're about. You need to realise that this thing is constantly moving. It's not a comfortable bus that we're on. You haven't got home comforts. There's no nice sofas in this church. There's just some fold-up chairs that we have to just get out every so often and sit on. You know, you're likely to bump into somebody in the confines of this bus. But this bus is on the move. That's what we've been like, and that's where we must stay, in that place of constantly ready. God, what do you want us to do next? Not comfortable, but clear about the destination. We may not know the physical, geographical, whatever implications, but we know the direction is what God wants. Does that make sense? We're going for His direction, whatever it might be. And I want us to remain mobile-hearted, go-hearted, even if we do one day get a fixed abode. That makes sense? So we meet here on a Sunday. It's not our home. We have a kind of a home until they decide to knock it down. Our offices, it's all kind of under the hammer. No, under the sledgehammer. At some point. It's all a little bit vulnerable. And it's easier to be of a go mentality when things are vulnerable. If we get a 24/7 kind of venue one day, our challenge will then be to stay go-minded and flexible. Or if we get more comfortable surroundings, or if we one day sort the heating out, then the challenge will be, are we going? And it won't be that we go for those surroundings at the expense of the important things I've just listed. We will go for those surroundings only because we feel it's what God's wanting us to do for the sake of welcoming more people. If we go for a more comfortable, fixed venue one day, it will be so that we can welcome more people in. It won't be just that we can make ourselves cozier. It won't be. Or if we go for more staff or more projects, it won't be to make us more comfortable. So in closing, on the morning of D-Day, as Allied soldiers, sailors and aircrew were preparing to undertake one of, if not the greatest military advance ever, 160,000 troops, 5,000 vessels, preceded by 1,200 planes. And it wasn't just the numbers, it was what they were trying to do, going across the channel, as it were. As they prepared to carry out this key moment in Operation Overlord, D-Day, Operation Neptune, as D-Day was codenamed, the fear, anxiety and discomfort of those involved is unimaginable. If you were in one of those landing crafts, the sea was so bad that day, they kept wondering about the weather, whether they needed to postpone. In fact, I think they did postpone it once. It's supposed to be June the 5th. It ended up being June the 6th that they actually went for it, because of the weather being so bad. And it was still bad. It was still choppy. Many of them had really gone for it at breakfast because they thought it might be their last meal. And many of them then puked that breakfast up as they were in those landing crafts, partly because of the sea, but partly also, I'm sure, because of the fear and anxiety of what they were going to meet as they got out of those landing crafts. Incredibly, the majority of them still got out of those landing crafts. I would have wanted to stay in. Most of them went to their deaths, but none of them were concerning themselves with how cold or how sick or how weighed down they were with the gear they were carrying. Some of them drowned because the gear was so heavy. They were overloaded with equipment. None of them were concerning themselves with those things. They were focused on their orders. They were focused on the vision. They were focused on a desire to defeat the enemy. Friends, if we're focused on the right things, we will be that Great Commission, going, mobile church that Jesus is after. We won't have time or the inclination for anything else. We will aim for community and friendship. We'll keep looking out for each other. We'll keep working at these friendships and being there for one another. But we will remain mobile, supple, ready for action, out of a love for His name, out of a desire for His presence, and out of concern for the outsider, with a desire to be open-doored and open-hearted. Let me read you A quote from Bishop J.C. Ryle, who said this: "Zeal in religion, or zeal for God, is a burning desire to please God, to do His will, and to advance His glory in the world in every possible way. It is a desire which no man feels by nature, which the Spirit puts in the heart of every believer when he is converted, but which some believers feel so much more strongly than others that they alone deserve to be called zealous men or women." This is written a few years ago. A zealous man in religion is preeminently a man of one thing. It is not enough to say that he is earnest, hearty, uncompromising, thoroughgoing, wholehearted, fervent in spirit. He only sees one thing, he cares for one thing, he lives for one thing, he is swallowed up in one thing, and that one thing is to please God. Whether he lives or whether he dies, whether he has health or whether he has sickness, whether he is rich or whether he is poor, whether he pleases man or whether he gives offence, whether he is thought wise or whether he is thought foolish, whether he gets blame or whether he gets praise, whether he gets honour or whether he gets shame, for all this the zealous man cares nothing at all. He burns for one thing, and that one thing is to please God and to advance God's glory. If he is consumed in the very burning, he cares not for it, he is content. He feels that, like a lamp, he is made to burn. And if consumed in burning, he has but done the work for which God appointed him. Such a one will always find a sphere for his zeal. If he cannot preach, work and give money, he will cry and sigh and pray. If he cannot fight in the valley with Joshua, he will do the work of Moses, Aaron and Hur on the hill. If he is cut off from working himself, he will give the Lord no rest till help is raised up from another quarter and the work is done. This is what I mean when I speak of zeal in religion. Wow!